at Bharat Forge Limited. Joining us with Mr. Soumitra Datta, who is ex-professor, which is former Dean of said Business School, University of Oxford, former Dean of S.C. Johnson College of Cornell University. Due to the technical glitch, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs would be joining very soon, but we request to start the conversation. So I will hand it over to Mr. Kalyani to take the session forward, please. Thank you so much.
It's almost afternoon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for your patience. As you know, we have a session with Professor Jeffrey Sachs. However, due to the delay in our startup, I think he's in a holding pattern somewhere. But it's our privilege to have Professor Datta with us. He is an eminent academician, and more than that, I think he's a very astute student of what drives global economies. And after his, let's say academic career, he has become an investor and mentor to technology and, start deep tech startups. So in the context of the biggest news that AP has recently had of a 15 billion investment in data, in a data center here, let's talk about what this means for Andhra Pradesh and how Andhra Pradesh and the people of Andhra Pradesh and India should think of leveraging this massive data investment going forward. So first of all, warm welcome, Professor Datta, and thank you for accepting this last minute invite to a fireside chat, in a sense, to talk about what does this mean. Maybe some opening comments from you.
Well, very good afternoon to everyone. Yeah, very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you, Amit, for your kind introduction. So, I've had the pleasure of meeting with Honorable Chief Minister Naidu a few times, and most recently also actually I had lunch with him about 2 months ago, and I'm always struck about his vision. I mean, he's a leader who's not just a great politician, but he actually has a vision and an interest in technology which is remarkable. He took me with him on this tour of some labs in near Amravati, and there were students showing their various projects. And what impressed me was he actually stood and he asked questions about each of the projects. And his questions were not just simple questions that he might ask, a person might just ask just because he wants to show interest. He actually knew some of the details. And he asked questions about why is this technology better than something else. The reason I'm saying this is because the state of Andhra Pradesh, and I think the country of India, is lucky to have political leaders who are interested in technology. It's very important because not many leaders are interested in technology. I have worked with many leaders around the world, and most have a very superficial level of understanding of technology and impact. So having said this, what I think I'm very optimistic about is the future of deep tech in Andhra Pradesh. Now, deep tech is something which is extremely important for the future of India. If you just look at the comparisons, I produce and I co-edit the Global Innovation Index each year. And the Global Innovation Index is like the biggest and the most widely used reference benchmark on a nation's capabilities on innovation. India has been moving up progressively very well, from 80 position 5 years ago, 38 this year. It's a big improvement. But China has moved in the top 10 this year. And if you look at the countries that have done well in the Global Innovation Index of the last several years, there's one common factor. the one common factor is, of course, national vision, but vision combined with a deep investment in deep tech. So I really think what is happening in Andhra Pradesh right now is a good sort of indication of what should happen in the country. When I speak and hear about the Quantum Valley and other kinds of big projects that are undergoing or underway in Andhra Pradesh, I'm very excited and actually hopeful about the future.
Yeah, so coming to exactly that, talking about the future, I think the first phase of India's technology business in the IT space has been driven largely by service companies, which have had large volumes of people to throw at relatively simple and maybe sometimes complicated problems, but not groundbreaking innovation. How do we now look at the new wave of technology, which is around data, data science, AI, and how do we look at this being a fresh start, clean start, and a stepping stone for India to become a true innovator in many new areas where India has no, let's say, base, and kind of moving from how we did from regular landline phones to state of the art mobile telephony without going through 5 generations or 5 iterations and having layered costs. So I just want you to help people think about how we are at probably in an advantage rather than behind the curve in that sense.
So if you look at the world of AI right now, there are essentially 3 things that are very important to succeed in AI. So the first one is chips, the second one is data, and the third one is energy. Okay, so I'm not saying in any particular order, but those are the 3 critical building blocks to succeed in AI. Now, we have a disadvantage because we don't have a chip industry. Okay, now the government is trying to create a chip industry, but that is going to take a long time. Okay, it's not going to happen in 5 years. So clearly we will have to rely to a large degree on chips coming from the Western market for a long time. But in the other 2 areas, we have strengths. Data is a strength because simple, the population of the country. Just simply the population gives us a pool of data, not just in terms of data of human beings, but also of devices. And the actual communication across devices, the way we communicate with data. You know, India is one of the highest mobile data rates in the world. No, lowest in terms of charges, but highest data usage. Highest usage of data in the world per user. So in that sense, data is a strength, and we have that big advantage. We have to build up even more the energy advantage. And this is where the investment, clean energy and solar and other kinds of areas becomes very important. And we have a huge landmass that benefit a lot of good sunshine and a lot of other natural resources. So to invest in those areas. So I do believe that those 2 elements are very important. We have to build and somehow find strategies to solve the chip issue. But if you're able to combine those things, we can certainly be a major player in AI. And I think we just have to look at the inspiration from what China has done with DeepSeek. Okay, because the Chinese model is fundamentally different from the American model. The American model is very much large companies owning more or less proprietary spaces, while the Chinese model, maybe out of necessity, one can argue because they were behind, has been one of open sourcing the technology. But China is really pushing aggressively the introduction of AI into daily operations of manufacturing companies, of service companies, and really integrating AI into every single aspect of operations and life. While some people criticize American companies for saying, well, they're over-investing perhaps in this drive for super intelligence. Now, super intelligence, whenever it is achieved, will give this massive advantage to the country and the economy. So there's a distinction out here, but India has to find its place, and India can find its place I think more along the operation side, more along the innovation side, more along the finding interesting applications that can turbocharge the industry out here, because there's one thing which makes Indian industry very unique, which is that the solutions coming out of Indian industry are by and large more affordable, more inclusive, and more global. And that is a huge advantage, because essential solutions out here can go across the world, in Africa and many other huge markets. The potential total addressable market is very huge.
No, thank you for that very important insight. I have one point to make and then one question. Clearly, what we heard about how data and AI can be used is a prime example would be Andhra Pradesh, how the Chief Minister desires and is building a model to use data and AI to improve outcomes, to improve governance, to improve delivery of service solutions, and even decision making for the government and the governance. So that's a great, I think, enabler and a great differentiator. But on the flip side, in a country like India with 145 crore people, and so many employed in lower end sectors or lower end manufacturing, there's always a fear that AI will destroy jobs. So I'm a believer that technology enables upward movement and mobility of jobs as long as we're able to reskill. Maybe you can elaborate on this and give your perspective, both from an immediate term point of view and also how we can look at building digital and AI ready kids and students, or getting them to think in that way, in the way that, in Korea, in Singapore, in China, they're already starting to build these kind of thought processes right from the school onwards.
Well, you're raising probably one of the most challenging topics in the discussion of AI. And tomorrow, in fact, we have a session in the plenary also about AI and jobs, and I'll be part of the panel there. But at some simple level, the big discussion, I think, in AI and jobs is this balance, the trade-off between what I would term as productivity and humanity. So there is clearly very important reasons about how you can apply AI to improve productivity in organizations. There is no debate around that. I think regardless of what the data shows in terms of benefits being there or not being there, you can optimize things, you can improve what you're doing tremendously with AI. The question really is, how far do you push down that path of productivity improvements? How much on the pedal do you in fact accelerate? Because at a technical level, AI is becoming pretty human capable. Okay? If you look at what human beings do, we typically do 3 buckets of activities. So one bucket of activity is we interpret data, interpret some kind of data, some patterns in data. You give me machine data, I can find machine is working well. You give me sales data, I'll find what the sales pattern is. Second thing what we do is we create new patterns. So we reconfigure the data to create new patterns. We try to think, if you have to increase sales, what do we actually have to do to make sure the new pattern of sales actually happens? So we create new patterns. And the third thing we do is we form human relationships. Empathy is what is seen as the strength of human beings. Today, the first bucket, interpreting patterns, machines do it better than human beings already. Okay, that's the reality. If you look at creating new patterns, the creativity part, machines are becoming as good, and in some cases maybe even becoming better than human beings. And even in high design environments, let's say like fashion, today the fashion designer in the major fashion houses has a whole bunch of new sort of social media analysis and other kinds of data being presented about what kind of skirts, what kind of colors might be the best for the next season. Even an industrial designer, like I'm on the board of this company, Dassault Systems, and Dassault Systems does all the software for making all industrial design. And they in fact have tremendous amount of expertise in suggesting the design to the designer. The role of the designer, human, is evolving into a much more of an orchestrator and trying to choose. So, in creativity becoming close, in some cases even better. In relationships, you might say, well, that's the ultimate relationships sort of strength of human beings. Today, there are bots that actually are the girlfriends or boyfriends of human beings. In China, there's a bot called Yonsei that has 600 million Chinese males as a boyfriend. Okay? Sorry, the bot is a girlfriend for the Chinese males. Now, this kind of bots are not just frivolous activities. Now they are being used for counseling people who have mental health issues, teenagers who are disturbed for some reason. So psychological counseling is also coming better with bots. So what it means is that technology is improving. All this is happening in the last 2 or 3, 5, 6 years. What will happen in the next 5, 6 years is critical, but assuming it continues, technology will become pretty much close to human beings. It'll be a co-partner for human beings. Now the big question that you have as leaders is, how do you combine the two assets? You have human beings and you have machines. And today, that decision is a very important one. How do we deploy technology to in fact enable and empower human beings, which is the more politically correct way of expressing technology in organizations? Or do we in fact say that, well, look, what we're doing in the world of AI has to basically be made cheaper and we sort of eliminate human beings? And this is what is the scary scenario. That today, if you read, today I was reading the Wall Street Journal, they are predicting 2026 will be the worst year for new graduates coming out of college in terms of jobs. There are no jobs basically for these people. If you look at, for example, the big tech companies, they're cutting back, and often the pressure is not because of AI replacing jobs, it's because of the amount of money they're spending on AI. All right, the investments in the technology, in the data centers and everything else. So whatever it is, whether it's the AI itself or AI spend, is putting pressure on jobs. So now it'll become the challenge of leaders who run companies, who run states, who run nations, but how do you deal with the humanity, the human dignity aspect? Because the reality is that, the way we have structured our industrial society, we associate the human dignity with jobs, with working, with being able to earn a paycheck, put the money on the table for the food on the families. And if that is threatened, or that is at risk, then that poses tremendous amounts of challenges. And I'm not sure we have actually found the right answer out there. So when you ask the question of jobs and AI, I think the decision will largely become one of what is the choice we make as leaders about how we want to deploy technology. If we push too hard on productivity and just profitability, we risk great harm to humanity. At the same time, to be competitive, you have to also be balancing the two. And humanity is very important for us to consider in the debate.
I think I don't think anybody could have explained this better than what Professor Datta did. He made 3 very important points, and the most important one that hit hard for me was this about dignity. As a child, seeing your parent go to work and come back at the end of the day is a feeling that brings a sense of normalcy. Can you imagine one day seeing your parents sitting at home? I mean, it would have a catastrophic societal impact. And I think it's something that in India, we don't have this hire and fire culture. I think we are at least I know that most family businesses in India are conscious capitalists. We believe that there's a higher purpose in creating employment. Yes, you have to create value, but it's not one at the cost of the other. So in that sense, at least at our companies, we're looking at how we can use the excess manpower that is created in our own companies through the use of technology to redeploy them to provide services to our plants abroad because the skills don't exist there. So we are actually using them as a back end. That's one. Second is, how do we redeploy people to be mentors, coaches, teachers? Because quite frankly, education is a sector which is underdeveloped or under staffed with the right kind of people. So I think that's another area that through CSR and other things we can do. And this whole thing about one versus the other, I don't think it can be one versus the other. Clearly we have to make a transition plan as industry of how do we create a transition strategy for our workforce, one that allows them to live with dignity and at the same time become more competitive. We're all seeing 15, 20, even 50% efficiency gains, but the place where the cuts will hit the hardest is in the indirect manpower, which is all your middle class and your emerging middle class, and that's really where it's going to hurt. So I think his articulation about this whole thought process and how to think about it is something to really keep in mind and think about deeply, because if we don't manage to do this effectively, we will create societal chaos. So thank you very much. Any areas that you see India is not focusing on enough in the deep tech space, or should double down on, or that young people should focus on in building skills, which maybe you can talk about a little, which can get disseminated further?
So I think India has done a lot, and we should be proud of the progress that we have made. So that's clearly the baseline. At the same time, what is happening is the pace of transformation in deep tech is accelerating. It's not slowing down. So even if you look at any area of technology or biotech or even climate tech, the pace of change is accelerating. So what this means is that we have to actually move equally fast, if not faster, than the best in the world. So the area where India needs to invest the most, in my view, given especially its strength in human capital, is in research and development. I think as a nation, we do not do enough R&D. I think the statistics can vary, but we invest about 0.6% of our GDP in R&D cumulatively. If you look at today, for example, China invests about 3%, has gone up over the years, about 3% of GDP. It's a much bigger GDP. You look at the leading nations in the world like Korea and Israel, and Finland, they invest about 4 to 5% of the GDP. If you look at the global spending in GDP across the world, and you just look at the columns of money being spent, two countries dominate that completely. It is the US and China, basically more or less equal. Total amount of money in R&D is more or less same, and the rest of the countries are all very small out there. So what it means for us is that as we grow as an economy from whatever it is right now to Viksit Bharat goals of several $1 trillion, we have to increase our investment in R&D. That by itself has a number of implications. It means, of course, investing more in science and technology, in the schools, in the universities. It requires investing more in good faculty in the universities. I think universities in India, we are very good, but think about it. How come we don't have a university that's ranked in the top 100 in the world? I mean, that is not a matter to be proud of. I mean, we should be trying hard to get at least a few universities in the top 100 in the world. And a lot of that is linked into a number of factors, but part of it is the research capability, the research funding, the industry links between industry and universities. So I would say the number one thing that we have to focus on as a country is more R&D and more research and development in linking universities and industry. Now, you mentioned earlier something I didn't pick up on about training education, and I think in AI, in areas like this, we should be, and I hear that some people are doing it in schools already, but we should be really ramping up the amount of education and training we provide to children and to young college graduates in AI. because this is becoming like a basic necessity. It's a life skill. It's a life, in Europe, many years ago, they did something called the European Computer Driver's License, ECDL. Whole program was launched about getting a lot of whole generation of Europeans to become more adept at some of the basic computer skills. How to use Excel, how to use the various packages on software on a computer so you can actually use computers. Today you need an equivalent of that in AI, because if you don't actually know how to use, for example, the prompting. Prompt engineering is a technique, nothing complicated, but it's a technique. If you know how to use it well, you can actually save your work and save your time and be productive in so much more interesting ways. So I think this kind of a skilling is very important. Think also about no-code app development. You don't need to actually know programming today to develop code, to develop apps or programming. So you can actually have systems where you can talk, and if you see it, if you haven't done it, there's a difference. If you haven't done it, if you see it being done, it is super impressive. People just talk, and the system actually develops the code, checks the code, verifies it, and gives you a complete app, even hosted on the right servers. So this kind of sort of no-code app development is very important, because I was a dean of a business school, and the business students, they are always used to the tech department being in the back office or in the quasi-mid office somewhere, not in the front office. But today, actually, business leaders like most of you in this room, you can develop your own apps potentially just by saying what you'd like to get done. So essentially, the whole technology development sort of engine is moving into the front office, is being done and decided by business leaders like you. And that is a skill which, if you don't know how to do it, you cannot do it. It seems like magic to be able to talk to an app and just get another app developed for you. But that is the reality of how you can run your business today. And that is something I think we have to train, educate our leaders, because they will be very good in the business in India, and also when they work with other, foreign partners.
So another highlight here that I took away was that technology is not in the background anymore. It's going to be in the foreground, guiding you and giving you inputs which you can act upon. And probably you can even do a what-if analysis on the inputs it gives you to do predictive analysis or predictive forecasting on what may be the possible outcomes. Another point you made, Professor, is about R&D. And this hits very hard for multiple reasons. That we as a company are very R&D oriented. We spend about 2% of our revenue on R&D. China spending 3% is probably far more than Norway and Sweden and Finland spending even 5%. Similarly, in India, I want to know that maybe we have to figure this out, but in India, probably 1%, 2%, 3%, carries a lot more weight than a 5% in the US. But the point is, we are underspending, and it comes back to the point about education, where our educational institutions are clearly not in the top 10. Top 100, forget about the top 10. But China has now managed to get at least 2 universities in the top 20. Tsinghua University, I think, is in the top 10. And there's probably a couple of others. Similarly in China, Japan, Korea, and so on and so forth. So that should be one part of it, which I think should be a public-private partnership, maybe something that industry, academia, government can focus on. But coming back to this, if you look at all this holistically, I worry about one thing, and that is a different kind of brain drain. If you look at the best educational institutions in India, the IITs, people go to IITs, more than 70-80% of them go and work for IT companies. And in IT companies, they're not doing rocket science. They're doing very mundane IT work. They're not building new companies. They're not making breakthrough innovations. And I worry that with these data centers coming here because of cheap power, cheap land, cheap labor, that it will push us into more of this humdrum mediocrity, technology mediocrity, rather than in the technology elite. That it will put us in this comfortably numb situation where people will have a good living, but really not do anything groundbreaking. And all the groundbreaking innovation will be powered from here, but the innovation and the capitalization of that innovation will happen in California and in other parts of the world. And this will lead to almost like a middle income trap for us. How do we think of incentivizing or disincentivizing that? And clearly, for a 5-year period, 10-year period, till you build the critical mass and you build the scale of delivery, it's okay to do that. But then you have to have a inflection point to move from there to the next orbit. This orbit shifting, how does one think of that?
So the middle income trap is a very complex issue, and it's a very interesting, there's a whole different debate by itself. But let me give you one real sort of anecdote that gives me hope for India's future. So I was privileged to study at IIT Delhi, and recently I went back for one of my reunions. As part of the reunion, they had us interact with the graduating class. So I was a computer science graduate, and so we have met with the computer science class, and we asked a simple question to them: how many of you are going abroad? Whatever, studying or something. In the class of about 70 students that were there, the graduating class, there were only 3 who raised their hand. Okay? The majority of the students were in fact trying to start companies. Okay? And that I found to be exciting, because what is interesting is that now the role model for the young STEM graduate or even the young graduate from Indian universities has evolved, because entrepreneurship has really picked up. And now you're finding a whole generation of young entrepreneurs who are emerging, who actually want to, bring their passion, their ideas to create new topics, to create new interesting concepts. So I do believe that this kind of inspiration that young people have, the excitement that they have about creating something, will ultimately be the solution. The challenge for us is to be able to support them, because you can have the desire and the passion. We don't have the right kind of support, you'll never get to the right place fast enough. And the support is partly education. So partly, of course, the universities and the educational systems have to support entrepreneurship, and we are not very good at doing it, believe me, even today. And second is that the ecosystems around them have to support entrepreneurship. It is very easy to get 50 lakhs for a seed fund. You want to start something, you want to get 10, 50 lakhs, it's easy to do that. You're talking about getting 500 crores, 100 crores, it becomes a different ballgame completely. And this is the difference between seed capital and growth capital. So any kind of growth capital is extremely hard to get, but that is the problem in most countries except probably for the US and maybe a little bit some parts of the UK. So I think we have to solve this kind of a valley between the seed and the growth capital also in the ecosystem, to be able to support our entrepreneurs who have the fire but need the support to get it done. I think if we can get that part right, India will progress.
Absolutely. And I think societally and psychologically, one more element that we have to, let's say, learn to do or not to do is to destigmatize failure. Because in a startup ecosystem, failure is a part and parcel. I mean, the reason I say this is I used to go to Israel a lot, and I used to meet people who are in their 3rd startup, 4th startup, and I used to first think that this guy's been in 4 failed ventures. But in the Israeli outlook, it was like he's in his 4th venture, he's 2 to the 4th time more likely to succeed now than fail. So I think we also as a society and a culture need to learn that there's nothing wrong with failing as long as you learn from it.
So, you're very right. Culture is a very important part of the whole startup mentality. 4 years ago, I co-founded a climate tech fund called Green Frontier Capital that is only focused on supporting climate tech ventures in India. We only do work in India. And we come across a number of ventures and young founders who in fact pitch their companies to us. And when I listen to them, I'm actually super impressed by how good they are, how much driven they are by what they're trying to build. You mentioned Israel. Israel is a very interesting example. It is often called the startup nation, and the reason it is called that is because, as you probably know, all Israelis, male and female, have to go through 2 years of compulsory military service. And when they go to the military service, what they get is basic management training and leadership capabilities. Okay, in the military 2 years, you learn project management, you learn how to actually manage a team, you learn the basic management. They also meet their team members they like, they form a relationship with. So when they go to universities after that, they don't really study doing the actual work, to put it bluntly. They are basically incubating companies. There's a massive, large-scale universities out there in Israel are really large-scale incubators of student projects. Exactly. And that works to the country's strengths. Of course, the country has a special situation of being isolated in an environment which is very hostile and so on. So having said this, there's a drive to succeed in the country which is amazing. In India, we have the big advantage that we have a large market. We don't necessarily have to go outside to sell our products necessarily. We have a large domestic market. And this is the same story in China. Chinese entrepreneurs have a large domestic market. So what they do in China is they first compete in China. And they compete so hard, the competition in China is so tough, so brutal, that they become really, really good. And they become really, really good, they are able to compete even globally. And I think that's really what the Indian model has to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And first of all, Professor Datta, thank you so much for doing this impromptu and sharing your immense knowledge and passion for the topic with us. For me, it was very insightful, great learning, and I'm really happy that you were able to share your views and knowledge with our delegates here. Thank you very much, and I think we can close the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hello. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalyani. Indeed, it was a great pleasure listening both of you. To respect and in honor, may I request Mr. Kalyani to felicitate our guest, Mr. Datta, with a token of appreciation from CII and Andhra Pradesh government. Can we have a big round of applause, please? Thank you so much. I request both the dignitaries to come forward.